Well, all right. Welcome, everybody, to another LinkedIn Live from Gen City Labs. My name is Mike Shaman. I'm CEO of GCL. Along with me, my fabulous co-host, Eric Arvai. If you guys have not joined us before, we typically do this every couple of weeks. We bring on a variety of guests from the events and experiential space. From a huge variety of backgrounds, from technology, people focusing on keynotes, people focusing on story and builders and more. So we appreciate it. If you guys are here with us live on LinkedIn, that is awesome. If you are watching on YouTube or X or Insta, we appreciate you all. It's going to be a fun afternoon. So without further ado, let me introduce the fabulous and super high visibility Joe Rivers. Joe, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, about how you got involved in the events and experiential space. And by the way, if you're watching this and you haven't seen Joe, he is an awesome follow. He posts up stuff all the time. It's how I know him, because there has been an onslaught of amazing content from him. But Joe, please tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you happened into the events universe.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you for the introduction there, and it's good to know both you and Eric. So I appreciate you guys inviting me on here. It's an interesting story. I think experiential has interesting stories. Everyone always has like, oh, you know, my journey was different, or I never heard of experiential. Don't know how I fell into it. I hear it all the time. So I'm gonna sound like probably just like that, pretty cliche, but it was very unorthodox how I got into experiential. Never heard about it really in college other than just event marketing, but kind of touched on it really quickly. And I graduated college, and I remember thinking to myself, I didn't want to just be in an ad agency. I didn't want to just only kind of be doing like traditional media, digital media. I was fascinated by it. Was always fascinated by the agency world. And I had a friend of mine locally here in Buffalo, New York, where I'm from, to say, hey, you want to do a brand ambassador gig? And I didn't really know what that was, other than just kind of going to your local liquor retail store and doing like samplings or something like that. But I eventually uncovered that that's a whole world, brand ambassador gigs, and evolved into becoming a tour manager, going out on the road for different agencies as a contractor to represent the brand and be that liaison between agency and brand. And it really excited and ignited my passion for experiential, doing those different tours. It allowed me to travel, which is something I love to do. Even just backpacking throughout those years when I wasn't on the road, I'd go backpack. So it just always fueled that. And then I eventually kind of evolved that whole tour managing, event production side of things, where I went into the business development and sales side of experiential marketing. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years in different capacities at multiple different agencies, but on the more production fabrication side with an emphasis on creative and strategy. So it was always my responsibility to kind of combine all of that, to the tour managing skills, to the networking, my passion for experiential, and how the behavioral marketing aspect of it came to be. And then I've just culminated that now into what I'm, now I'm kind of out there just doing whatever kind of makes sense for me now. So.
Awesome. Right on. That's I love the starting out as brand ambassador and on the road. I actually didn't have that opportunity, but boy, have I heard a lot of stories about people that are just, going with a truck from city to city all over the country. It sounds like a lot of fun and a great way to get into it. So today we're focused on emotion and experiential and how to evoke emotion. And honestly, we thought you were the perfect guest for this topic, because you have been to just about every major event that has taken place. And if you think about the tent poles of the events and experiential industry, you think about CES, you think about South by Southwest, you think about Super Bowls, you think about major festivals, right? Lollapaloozas and EDCs. These are all kind of massive opportunities for brand marketers to connect with their consumers in real life. And, the most effective ways that we see brands doing that are typically through storytelling mechanisms. And, if you are a good and powerful storyteller, you are going to be able to evoke emotions, right? Those can be, super positive and joy, right? That can be fear. You are gonna, something horrible is gonna happen to you if you don't engage with our brand. It runs the gamut. So with that context, Joe, tell me a little bit about, one of your more recent event experiences. What was the last one you were at? Would I be right in saying South by was the last kind of big brand event experience space you were out at?
Yeah, South by was certainly the biggest of like the experiential space. I did go out to San Francisco for a different event called the ABPM, which is kind of all about the innovation and executive briefing centers,
Briefing
which
program
has
managers, we know them well.
yeah, which is a fascinating experiential approach. I had a tour of the Microsoft facility, and I was just taken back at how multi-sensory and immersive it was, and that kind of goes with the emotional, how emotions are evoked through these experiences. I wrote a memoir last summer for just the fun of it, just to kind of like write and articulate more and kind of do some storytelling myself. And it's called The Four Emotions, and it was about love, fear, nostalgia, and hope, and how, from my experience of 33 years on this earth, every single person tends to go through those emotions simultaneously or just individually. And it's been really, really interesting to see how the experiential industry tends to embrace those emotions. And again, to your point, fear can be used, hope can be used, love can be used, and certainly we see it with nostalgia all the time. But that was a long-winded way of saying, yeah, South by was the most recent big one.
No, let's dive in. Okay, so we have love, fear, nostalgia, and hope, right?
Correct.
What a perfect framework for the conversation. Let's start with love. What activation have you seen, out of your travels that you think did an awesome job of evoking the feeling of love? And by the way, if love trends towards love of brand or love of cause or love of, I think in general, there is a joyfulness aspect of that, a happiness aspect to that. Can you name an experience that you've seen? And Eric, by the way, feel free to chime in if you can think of one too. I'll certainly chime in with mine after Joe regales us with tales of love.
That's a tough. I'm going to say this right now, Michael. That question is like when someone goes, "What's your favorite country or city or something like that?" And you're like, I don't know if I can answer that because every single thing has its own. But I'll say that when you go to an activation that really tugs at the attachment you have toward, let's say, that brand or that IP, that's really great. So I'm going to use love and nostalgia for one that I remember I went through during the pandemic. It was like 2021. I was in New York City. I lived there for a little bit, and my dad was going through something from like, had to get some lung surgery and everything. He's fine and all, but I remember having to bring my family down to New York City for the whole entire, procedure. And I have two older sisters, and all three of us watched Friends back in the day. And I think it was right when the Friends experience was basically being executed in New York City. They had the whole exhibit, and it was the whole Friends experience. And my sisters and I brought them kind of to show them what we do, because most people don't understand what we do for a living. And I was like, well, this is what we do. But I remember bringing them through that experience because it was both going to be nostalgic for us. We knew that already. We knew that it was going to evoke all that emotion of, wow, we get to be in the apartment that Chandler and Joey were in and everything. So that was obviously accomplished. But the love aspect was probably because everything was going on with my family at that time and tying it in with the IP of Friends. So I remember, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe the agency Superfly was behind that.
I was going to say, definitely our friends at Superfly for sure.
Yeah. So kudos to them. I know Richard Black over there. He's a wonderful guy. And I just remember being so in love with each detail that was being presented in that experience, and obviously sharing that with family too. So that's kind of my example that comes to mind really quickly when I think of both love and nostalgia.
Awesome. Yeah. Eric, do you want to fire something off that you can think of?
Yeah, love's a tough one. So for me, that is less. It's more of an indirect association with a brand because it's about the personal experience that I have with family or friends or community. So a couple examples are, sporting events, old soccer games with my dad. And while I know like Heineken sponsors the Champions League or something, does it mean that I love Heineken? Not necessarily, but I totally associate that special experience with my family and friends and things like that. So it's not quite as like, oh my God, I feel actual love for the brand, but
no, that's okay.
Association, right?
I don't think it needs to be that direct, right?
Yeah.
I think that if you are a brand and you want to harness fan passion, right?
Yeah.
Because that's really the feeling. I'm a Niner fan, right?
Yeah.
When I go to Levi Stadium, I see the brand activations. I mean, clearly I'm in the space, but it's that love of team that you're tapping into.
Yeah.
And if you can embrace that in unique ways by giving people access to things, we've been doing some stuff for the Detroit Lions for the last few years with an augmented reality photo experience, right? It gets them this cool virtual experience with a player. It taps into their love of team and gives them something memorable brought to them by the team and by a brand sponsor. So I think it's less about inspiring direct love of a brand, although there certainly are some brands out there, a Yeti or a Liquid Death that have fans and that are absolutely loved, and more about tapping into that emotion that individual attendees of an event are feeling at the moment and being able to somehow harness that into an adjacent experience with the brand. I'd say I have an interesting one that I just remembered. I haven't thought about this activation in a while. We did for Genworth Financial. It's a company that is more of an insurance company, and what they wanted to do was create an experience that allowed loved ones to talk with family members about their estate planning, about their last will and testament, right? Not an easy message to get across. Not at all. Really freaking hard. It's like, hey, mom, dad, or grandma, grandpa, or uncle, aunt. That's not a thing that you can very easily broach, right? Not a comfortable subject. But they realized for their clients that it's important to do that. So they had us build a giant coffee cup that people could walk inside, digital interactive screens inside where people could self-identify, have I done estate planning? Have I gone through this, right? Part of this is lead gen. Part of it is what kind of message would you want to record to your mom or dad to say this is something that we should be thinking about? And then let us send it to them, right? So it is a branded and sponsored way to initiate a conversation, to tap into what is a very difficult familial conversation, and that allowed them to break the ice on it, right? It taps into your love, it taps into your family, it taps into, also an important financial aspect for you and the future. That was one of the more unique ones that we've been a part of, certainly a little bit out of left field. So, but certainly one that I remember is kind of being in the category. Let's move to the opposite side of the spectrum, Joe. We're going to move to fear. What is scared the hell out of you that has been an absolute memorable experience from a brand? That could be, fear and uncertainty for future. It could be, heck, you can use jump scares or an activation like American Horror Story has done in years past. What do you think? And falls in that category?
That's what I wanted to suggest is as I can't put one on the spot at the current moment, but I know just from the moment that even in a theatrical aspect, whether you go to Universal Studios and you go to like the Harry Potter world, this is something that I did like years and years ago, but I remember going and I was like by myself and I literally went on that roller coaster in the Gringotts experience thing, and you were like afraid, and in a weird way that you knew you were safe, but there was like a fear of it, like where it is, where it's going, And I bring that up because I've had that happen where you go to an activation and there's a component to it, or there's some interactive element that you don't really know what's gonna happen, and you could say that for haunted houses. It's still an experience. I think experience is being thrown around quite a bit lately in today's age. Everyone wants to capitalize on that. However, really, like a true experience is something that obviously evokes a cathartic emotion, whether it's positive or negative. But either way, that fear comes out in something that is more interactive. So I can't particularly put one out right now that's a fear-based emotion from an activation recently, but that emotion still is pretty prevalent in certain activities, certain activations, certain moments, maybe in a whole storytelling immersive environment.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say, looking at the psychology of events, and just the psychology of humanity, variable reinforcement is very, very powerful, right? So you bring them up, you bring them down, you bring them up, you bring them down. That is going to create this kind of memorable and resonant flywheel of experience if you can tap into it the right way. I'll give an example. RSA Security was in San Francisco last week, right? If you guys haven't been to RSA, massive cybersecurity conference, and very often we get requests to do the black hat hacker hacking into your systems, massive data loss, right? Breach, red alert, DEFCON 1. Oh my gosh, what do we do, right? How do we address a threat in real time? How does a cybersecurity company come up with an experience to get across the value proposition of their product, to also incite the concern amongst individuals that there are very real risks that exist out in the marketplace, and then we actually have the product that can address those risks. So, I see it, and that's a very on the nose example of you're being hacked. Wait, no, you're using our product, you're not. But boy, is that, a nice way for people to get across a message, especially in the security space, about products and services. So, it's certainly something I've seen where you're being attacked in some way. This product is keeping you safe and keeping you safe from harm. Eric, what do you got in the fear universe?
So I'm going to go more like thrill, not necessarily jump scare fear, but Red Bull. I mean, they're the events that they sponsor, come on, like the extreme sports and all the cool GoPro footage you've got where you're sort of experiencing what the first person thrill of skiing down some crazy chute and doing backflips, or squirrel suit flying, and all the awesome fun extreme sporting events that Red Bull tends to sponsor. I think they have capitalized on that emotion, but almost better than anyone, and they're obviously wildly successful.
Eric, it's funny you mentioned that. I have a friend at Red Bull. His name's Will Herbert, and he invited me to go to a page that happens out. I think it's in Utah, and it's that extreme biking event.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Those are crazy.
It's like hardcore, crazy. I'm just it is one of those things where you're looking at it as a bystander and you kind of go, whoa, like that would make me very, very afraid or very thrill seeking, like all those different kind of subgenres of the emotion of fear, that ties together. And you're like, yeah, and I'm feeling it. I can remember. It's funny, bringing this up, and I think this goes to Michael's point about how the behavioral aspect of things kind of triggers memories, And so even talking about this right now reminds me of when I went to Disney World with my family when I was 16 years old, and we went to that one virtual kind of VR experience, if you will. It was called Soaring, where you guys sat in this basically stand still roller coaster thing, but the whole screen was this experience as if you were going through the fields of cornfields or mist going up at you, but you would get almost a sense of thrill when it felt like you were going down or you're going into a canyon or something like that.
Yeah.
And that just made me remember that right there, which is pretty wild. So.
And nostalgia.
Yeah.
So it's all tied in. Yeah.
There you go.
That's great. I love that. So let's transition to that one. So I know you kind of talked about it, but maybe a pure nostalgic play. I know, there's a lot of great activations that are capitalizing on 80s fandom and things like that. You guys have any great examples there?
Yeah, I have to say, nostalgia is one of those ones where I think people obviously capitalize it because it's an easy one, right? I mean, if you're a '90s kid, right now people are doing '90s things, and it makes sense. That Friends experience certainly captured, me like that. Absolutely. I'd also say the Paramount has been doing an activation at South by and doing kind of a multi-city tour, if I'm not mistaken, with the Lodge, and each IP is obviously based on a show that's part of Paramount. However, some of those IPs are clearly very nostalgic. I went through the Paramount Lodge at South by the last 2 years, and there was one about the Grease show. There's one of Star Trek. There's all these different ones that clearly evoke that nostalgia feeling from either when you watched the original Grease, let's say, all the way to, hey, I'm watching this IP right now, or I just saw it, and here's how the way I
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a micro level experience on the nostalgia front, and that is the old Magic 8-Ball. We very often get asked for, if you guys know the Magic 8-Ball, you shake it up and it says, yes, no, not quite your time. It has a few kind of cryptic messages, and if you ever have a question in your life, you shake the Magic 8-Ball and what pops up, but one of the answers on a little triangular die inside of it. We very often get asked for things like that have that look and feel, which is really fun, right? It is nostalgic. It is a moment. It is a moment to earn some attention time from an attendee. So if you're a brand, it doesn't. You don't have to be embracing 80s or 90s entirely with your brand message, right? You can use that nostalgic element as a hook, right? And in this case, the hook is get them to engage with an experience. And whether that's, kind of recreating an actual Magic 8-Ball, or whether it's doing a digital version, which is more typical of what we end up doing, those can be really fun, really quick shot experiences for users, but it gets them to cross the threshold of your experience. It can get them engaged for a short period of time. It can make them more receptive to other messages that you're providing throughout the space. So I'd say, those types of requests that we get play right into the wonderful world of nostalgia, and it is one of my favorite levers to pull.
It is. I love that. It's something that comes to mind, and I did touch on it in that memoir, because I think this is what first invigorated that emotion of nostalgia for me in advertising, in particular, was the scene in Mad Men when Don Draper is going through the Kodak carousel.
Oh, the carousel! Unforgettable episode.
Totally.
It's the best.
Yeah. It literally is the embodiment of that emotion, because it's the embodiment to people who understand advertising as a whole. Kind of think about it. You're up there, you're pitching in front of a potential client or prospect, and he's literally showing his own life on the carousel to evoke a nostalgia in himself during the pitch. Which, if you guys remember that scene, obviously at the very end, when the lights go on, his colleague goes, "Good luck at your next meeting," because he knew that the prospect's client were just like, "Wow, how could every emotion was just tugged." So it's that one's always comes to mind for that.
Oh, it's so good. Seriously, one of my all-time favorite episodes of television, right there.
Emotion,
right up there, totally.
So for me, I think one of the more memorable nostalgic activations actually hasn't happened yet. And I'm not sure if we can talk about it, but we are working on a flagship store in New York for a very famous game. Is that something we could talk about, Mike?
That's a great question. I think it's deployed. It's up and running if you happen to be at Rockefeller Center.
Yeah, check it out. But so Super Mario Brothers is a big part of my childhood. Anywhere I see any association with it, I love it. My 13-year-old son loves. Everybody knows it. Doesn't matter how old you are. And so, the tapping into the old school gamer in me, that sort of evokes an emotion. You can't walk past an activation that has something cool like that, and not engage.
And
How
in
old
the store, in the Nintendo flagship store in Times Square, they also have Mario in real time, where they actually took the original Mario's voice, not your Chris Pratt from the movie, but it's a Mario, the high pitch, and you can actually have a conversation with Mario in real time. Really fun activation, and the OG Mario voice. I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
All right, well that moves us over to Hope. And I classify Hope in a little bit of a different way, maybe. I think of Hope more as an aspiration, right? And when I think of aspirational brands, oftentimes I think of luxury brands. These are the LVMHs of the world. These are the Mercedes-Benz of the world. These are your premium high-tier offerings that are very, oftentimes ego expressive purchases. But man, can brands do a hell of a job of creating FOMO. So when I think of wanting to evoke an aspirational moment, it's create FOMO, right? That can be found in an event itself. It can be found in a Lollapalooza, right? Live Nation, as Lollapalooza, they do a hell of a job of promoting the artists that are going to be there. Their experience is going to be created. Multi-day festival, amazing. Coachella is another one, right? Of like, and then brands within that space want that association, right? So if you're a brand and you want to kind of create that aspirational moment, sometimes it's being associated with an event that everybody wants to go to. Other times it can be the brand itself, right? Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta has some really awesome experiences within it, interactive experiences, talking about their new electric vehicle line, right? Talking about new experiences and creating really unique interactions that fans can walk through and dive into, that give them these, show them the future of what Mercedes is providing, and gives them that like aspirational, holy crap, maybe I can get there. So that is how I personally approach the emotion of hope. But Joe, would love to hear what you got on the topic.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, it's funny when you were saying all that, you gave me an aspiration of an activation that I remember going through at Art Basel just last year, just in December, in the Miami show of Art Basel. The activation was done by IKEA, and I've never seen an activation done by IKEA ever in my life. I actually don't know if they do a lot of experiential. That may have been one of their very first like pop-up experiential brand activations ever. And they showed up at Art Basel. Well, if anyone knows about Art Basel, obviously that's the culmination of true artists, and they combine it with the culture and the community of kind of the place that they're going to geographically. Well, IKEA showed up and took over a retail space that had each vignette, each space of the retail environment that you walked through was of a completely different color palette, which was beautiful, like beautifully designed from an aesthetic point of view. And then every single room had something else that you could argue was hopeful or aspirational to what you would want to integrate into your own home. And obviously, if anyone's ever been to an IKEA, you go through a showroom, it's very like, oh my God, this, I mean, we don't have to go into the whole putting it all together. That's a whole different story. But, the actual element of going through and seeing everything and, oh my God, like, wow, this is super cool because it combined art. So there was drawings and painting that you could do in the activation. There was a Zen room that had a ton of Japanese influence to it. So super like aspirational there, especially for someone like me, because I love that culture. So that to me, when that stood out from a hopeful, hope emotion, and kind of just one that was really well done personally.
That's a good one. It's interesting how you guys sort of pick two aspects of that emotion. For me, I think more of like a brand that embraces philanthropy, a little bit of altruism, right? So like Tom's, the shoe company, you can't not want to support a brand that gives away one shoe for every one that's purchased, to somebody that needs it. I love that idea that there is sort of hope for the future, or hope for humanity, or some way to sort of give back as part of the brand message. Because there's tons of brands that have a philanthropic arm, of course, but it's not really embedded as part of who they are. And so for me, the emotion is more in a direct association with the brand than it is, with a particular activation or experience. So it's just a little slightly different angle there.
No, I like the cause related philanthropic angle, because it is so relevant today, right? A lot of brands are aligning with causes in a lot of unique ways. We're seeing all sorts of efforts being made. In fact, one of our former guests, Waco Hoover, shout out to Waco, he's starting a new agency called Impact that is actually intended to help support and align brands with appropriate causes to make sure that they're being effective in it, right? It's not just not just kind of spraying money out there or making efforts that might not be effective. So we're seeing more and more in that space, and I think that's totally relevant and on point. So Joe, without even knowing it, you set up the whole framework for our conversations that we've gone through 4 major emotions. So with that said, tell me, what are you excited about that's coming up around the corner? And this can be major events. This can be activations that you've heard rumblings of. This can be, new brand experiences. What are you seeing out in the universe that is on the radar for the balance of 2024?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am attending C2 Montreal next week, which has been on the bucket list for Experiential for quite some time, actually. I was told to go to that many years ago, and how amazing it is from a learning perspective. It's not your South by Southwest. It's not your industry trade show either, or just trade show in general. It is a learning space. It's an educational space. It's almost like TED, out in Vancouver. So it's this creativity, experiential. There's some, obviously there's going to be coverage on AI and sustainability. But I'm just so excited for the labs that they call it, like kind of these learning sessions that are truly interactive. And that kind of touches on something that I think brands are leaning more into now is, what is an experiential activation? For me, it needs to be something that's multi-sensory, something that truly is engaging a little bit more than just one or two of the senses, So I personally am really excited for that, and I see that. I know Erica; she's incredibly talented and wonderful, and the XP Land with the XP fronts that's going to be happening next week at C2 is just going to be. I think it's going to be something truly magnificent. So I'm excited for that one. That's on the docket. Would love to meet up with anyone that is going there. And then obviously Cannes Lion is coming up. It's a South by Southwest on steroids, if you will. It's
in the south of France.
Yeah, in the south of France too. I went for the first time last year. That was pretty overwhelming, but understandably so. So I'm excited. There's going to be a lot of brands that I think are going to show up again in a different capacity, and then we'll see who else is showing up there, because I think more brands are realizing the potential at events like a South by, at a Cannes Lion. Kind of a forward thinking, because I know that was part of the question too. I shared something on LinkedIn recently about a Wall Street Journal article that highlighted events that are super exclusive and invite only. And there's only some out there that really are kind of well known, and I'm sure Wall Street Journal kind of outed some of those too. But some of these events are not very heavy on experiential or events or brand activations, I'm saying, with any media presence or anything, because the event itself is a curated experience. So I think actually more brands are going to be implementing those as its own IP, its own cohesive, curated experience that will be exactly that for its attendees. And we won't know kind of what it's like because we're not invited, but I think that's the point.
Yeah, I've been to one of those in my life. It was a storytelling conference that was held in Deer Park, Utah. There were about 200 brand marketers, and I happened to like, I was riding along with, we were doing some work for Unity at the time, and not normally a conference I'd get an invitation to, but we got kind of jammed in there last minute, and it was incredible, right? Super curated, lovely dinners, amazingly intimate, right? Just very tight group over a few days at a it was at the Montage, so it was super fancy, and it was unbelievable. And you're right. I think we're seeing more and more of that. Also, shout out to the XP Land for the upcoming XP upfronts for sure. Also, what we see with Liz Lathan and Club Ichi, right? And that is more for the event marketer connections, right? A little bit in the industry and somebody that's doing really great curated events that are out of the norm, right? It's not sign up, get a badge, hit a show floor, go to a few sessions, and go to a happy hour. It's very different.
Yeah, it's more than that. I think of three people right now that are like filling it in the space of, all right, what does experiential mean, but in different lenses, right? You have Erica, part of XP Land, doing wondrous things with like the creative space of it. You have Liz and her colleague Nicole, who are both wonderful, kind of executing like how do fans engage at trade shows, events, different experiences. And then another friend of mine, who actually is from Buffalo as well. Her name's Kim True, and she started a group called the Experiential Collective, and it's more of like a safe haven of brand marketers and agencies that come together just to share trends and activations as more of an inspiration kind of aspect of things, with every month a guest speaker. And she's actually at one of those kind of highly exclusive events happening this week called Stream, that's done by WPP, and that's happening out in California right now. So
shout out Kim. I actually had a chance to hang out with Kim at South by this year. She's awesome. Yeah. I'll throw one more out there just because I had a chat with him earlier this week. Julius Solaris. If you aren't following Julius and you're in the event space, man, get on it, because that Julius has become the event technology guru. He knows everybody who's anybody and is putting together some really, really interesting and unique. He's got a great newsletter and some great events. Yeah. Shout out, Julius. You continue to be a great follow and do great things. I'll say one event I'm looking forward to, this is a little bit more on the geekier side, but, Infocom is coming up. Infocom has the latest, greatest in display technologies, and that's going to be everything from massive LED walls and to individual digital screens to glasses and wearables. And while that's not exactly a brand activation haven, I think that a lot of the stuff that I'm going to see there is going to make its way into brand experiences, right? These are going to be new mediums for storytelling as we look to the future of events. So that one for me is in particular something that I'm excited about getting out and spending a few days at.
Yeah, that is something you touch on. Only real quick, because I just wanted to touch on the fact that everyone always brings up trade shows as if it's like this kind of like it can't be experiential. When I noticed some booths and some exhibits being very highly engaging from that multi-sensory touch point, as long as it's done right. I understand that there needs to be an educational part of it. A lot of times there's, if you will, and then there's demo stations and whatnot. But if done right, and Liz from Wiarichi, highlights some different aspects of things. I know I saw it from SK Telecom at CES earlier this year. Just if there's different elements that you can combine into a trade show booth, you can create something truly experiential there. It doesn't always have to be a pop-up or a retail takeover or some event that's happening off-site. It could be done right in the trade show. A little bit more creativity has to be applied, but I think that's the point, and that's what brands are looking for too.
So we started the conversation and you touched on the ECB at Microsoft, and you said something that stuck with me and I want to follow up, which was that the best experiential marketing engagements involved the five senses. And I think that's so important. And you were kind of just touching on it here. The best ones tell the story, but do it through the senses. And I was hoping that you would give us a little more details on either the Microsoft one or something else that really touched on, and get tactical, right? Like, what did they
Yeah.
do? Smell of vision. What do you got?
I'm going to have to touch on that Microsoft one. ABPM, I didn't know what I was walking into because I didn't really have much knowledge on ABPM or the Executive Briefing Center kind of industry and just innovation centers. I knew that they existed. I just didn't know much about them. However, going there, the first couple of days, it was like sessions just in a hotel kind of, conference room, and you're just like, all right, I don't know if I'm really learning a lot. I think some of the other attendees were definitely learning things. I wasn't sure it was the right space for me, right? The third day was the creme de la creme. It was like the day where you go and you take a tour of a brand's innovation center that you signed up for, right? So there's Apple, there's HP, there's all of them, Google. Microsoft had one where everyone else that selected them, you'd go and see two of them in one day, right? And that's only about 3 hours at each, so it wasn't a lot of time. Microsoft, you got to choose.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, I thought that was me. I was intentionally being silent. He was just getting to the peak of the story.
Sorry, yeah, you froze for a second.
Back?
Yeah, you're back on. Microsoft chose.
We lost you right when you were starting to talk about the Microsoft experience. So
the others were 3 hours. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. So it was a it's a state-of-the-art facility. They have about a little bit over 50 of them globally. This one happened to be down in the Santa Clara area of like a 640,000 square foot space. So massive space. And this was a 6-hour tour that we were given. The whole tour was multi-sensory, and that's why I brought. I was so taken back at what Microsoft was doing and what ABPM was obviously offering. So kudos to everything. And there's the gentleman, John, that was part of Microsoft that gave the tour along with his colleagues, just knocked it out of the park. From when you entered, there was people with like curated drinks and low food, appetizers, and then going through the space, which was just architecturally done just so beautifully, the aesthetics, the sound, everything. And every room that we went into, whether it was the theater room where you could actually demo a VR and like some gaming systems, to going to their actual demo room where there was state-of-the-art technology and products that they're deploying and showcasing to their customers. So everything had something, it was whether it was touch to the sense of smell and taste when there was a lunch being done, which was culinary experts coming in from around the area, all the way to the sense of also smell and just kind of sight. You went up onto the rooftop of the whole innovation center, and as you walk through, there's the garden that they grew that are all locally sourced seeds and everything, and employees could take home parsley or basil or something like that. It was pretty fascinating. And there's a state-of-the-art fitness center. I think one of the cool parts that really kind of stood out to me was all the food that they do have is sourced in a 100-mile radius of the innovation center, and that is applied at every single one globally. So again, all these different things just combining into this multi-sensory experience. I had to go up to the employees after the whole tour and just say, look, I'm not trying to pump my chest or anything, but I've been to a lot of activations, and this was really, really magical. So kudos to the Microsoft team out there.
Right on. Yeah, they do very good work. I've been to ABPM events, and I've been on some tours before, and there are some very surprising and super impressive activations out there in that space. It's really interesting to see what can be done when you have the ability to be thoughtful and deliberate and build something out over a long period of time that needs to be up for more than like 3 days.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, there's some very impressive stuff. In fact, we built some applications for Microsoft in their briefing centers that have been deployed globally. So we know them well. They're very, very impressive. So for those of you guys that are joining us on LinkedIn, we appreciate you guys. If you're joining us on YouTube, Insta, X, name your social media platform of choice. Thank you. Today, our guest is Joe Rivers. We've been talking about emotion in Experiential, and we're winding down to the bottom of the hour here. Usually I take this and do a quick lightning round question about, trends. Today, we're going to talk a little. Oh, no.
Sorry.
You almost killed it. Eric's in a hurry to get out of here. Let's talk about trends and, let's pick out a trend that you're seeing that you think is going to sustain for the next year for event marketers. That trend can be, something we've already covered. It can be harnessing emotion. It can be something that you've seen a very specific instance of. It can be back-end infrastructure, right? What do you think is something that will be more apparent in the event space and that we're going to see more of throughout this year and into next? Eric, I'm going to start with you because you were the one who tried to stop the stream early.
That's my.
You've now been summarily nominated.
Where's it going? So, obviously AI is everywhere right now, and it's only going to be more pervasive in every aspect of all our lives all the time. And so I think there's going to be a lot more personalization utilizing AI. So, for example, you might know a bit about a person based on their registration for a particular event, and that should allow you to make interactive experiences that are sort of personal or customized to that person, whether it's from their geography, where they were from. You'll be able to tap into maybe if they give up, some personal information like their age, and so tap into some nostalgic factors. But essentially having, a way to connect with somebody approaching, whether it's a trade show of your booth or whether it's an ECB, but have some sort of personal experience, tapping from a huge body of an LLM that might be able to, better connect with the attendee.
AI personalization. I like it. Joe, what do you got?
Well, I gotta have a little bit of an additional comment on that, because I don't know if you guys saw the Open AI announcement a couple days ago with everything.
Oh, yeah.
Been using it.
It's, that whole new feature, and certainly when Sora gets deployed, because that's going to be a whole voice to video thing. There's a lot there. It's scary. It's funny. I sent that video to like my friends who don't do experiential at all, or just people who are trying to stay off the grid, if you will. I'm like, you're not going to stay off the grid. This stuff is here to stay. It's going to be probably very pervasive, but at the same time, it could be useful if applied the right way, and in a way that is beneficial to a lot of different people, and I think that is the point of it. It's trying to be beneficial. I saw one of the tutorials of a father using the AI to help his kid with his math that he couldn't do, and like that's great. Yeah. So I agree with that trend. I know trend is an interesting word. Everyone's trying to come out with the latest trends and everything. I don't know if I want to use the word trend, but I'll say that that Delta Airlines right now is crushing it with curated personalization experiences, right? And that's where I think the industry has always kind of been, but whether it was executed correctly is up for debate. However, the CMO there, Alicia Tillman, who I know through a wonderful friend, Nicola Kastner, Alicia and her entire team are crushing it at Delta. They have showed up at Coachella. They showed up at Cannes They showed up at Art Basel, and they showed up at South by Southwest, and that was the one that I went through, where a friend of mine, Jamie, through, and I got the VIP experience of when you go and sit down in like a first class, and they built out this kind of like custom decor and almost kind of replicated business class lounge, seating, and you sit down and you got an Aperol Spritz brought to you, and you got personalized screen right there, and it felt like you were obviously in the plane and boarding. That whole thing, in addition to when you walked into the space at South by for the Delta Airlines lounge, was just well done. It was just carefully selected of different things, different elements that you could engage in, or just kind of sit down and get away from all the hustle and bustle of outside in Austin, Texas during the time. I think that is something of different trends within an experience that'll be picked up or emulated throughout.
Awesome.
Great example.
Yeah. I'm going to take it home, and I'm going to say we are seeing more thoughtful environments being created that mix digital and physical experiences. They're really doing a great job of not just putting a screen up somewhere that's going to be looping a video, but rather integrating digital screens and digital experiences throughout. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean those are interactive and touchscreen things, but it can mean they're in surprising spaces. It can mean they can be informational. They can be directional. It can be just some really unique and immersive build outs that we're seeing that are just top tier stuff. And we're seeing the importance of in real life events. And I know I hammer on this every week, but the importance of people physically congregating in a space is so huge, and brands are certainly, I think, embracing that. And we're really seeing a resurgence in the live event space right now. But I think those really gorgeously built and thoughtful environments are something that people have always tried to achieve. I'm seeing people do a much better job of it right now. Some very impressive stuff. So once again, my name is Mike Shaman. I'm CEO of Gen City Labs. Eric Arvai, our head of partnership. Joe Rivers, the fabulous and deeply experienced events professional. We appreciate your time. Everybody in the audience, we'll be back in a few weeks. Thank you once again for joining us, whether it was here on LinkedIn or other platforms, live or later. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe.
Take care.
Thank you.